Hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of Demon Folklorist. I am, as you've probably guessed, the Demon Folklorist Victoria J, and today we have my sister Lex with me. We are going to be talking about monstrous brides, which are usually dolls or doll-like. All right, say hello, Lex.
Hello, beautiful people. Hope you're doing good, and I hope you haven't forgotten about me. I know it's been a while.
It's been at least 5 episodes, something like that. So let's kick this off by talking about Frankenstein and Frankenstein's bride. So she was barely in the movie. The last 3 minutes, something crazy like that. And I'm just I'd like more of her, please. She's awesome. Female-driven stories are often more complex in general. These two movies that I had seen, I don't know if you've seen these. There was this one called Wishcraft. It was from 2002. And then The Final Wish from 2018. And both of these movies were basically the exact same story. It gave men the ability to wish for whatever they wanted. One dude was a teenager and the other one was a grown man. And they essentially wished for the same things. They wanted women, or that particular woman they had their eye on, to crawl all over them, essentially, to be better looking for those women, or to make a lot of money. Just give us more unhinged women. Look at Pearl. She was amazing. She was terrifying and completely bonkers and insane, and yet, you felt for her. What do you think of Frankenstein and his bride?
I think I definitely agree in the fact that, yes, I would definitely like to see more of her. It's not a movie that I'm super familiar with now. I read the book, so I can vouch that I think the monster of Frankenstein is actually an incredibly complex character and also really tragic. I think looking at it, I'm going to go into his defense a little bit. I mean, you look at this person, monster, however you want to see it, and you just see these incredibly universal themes of being human. The pain of loneliness, rejection, and being ostracized can cause, to the point where he basically just wanted to die by the end of that movie. He met a monster and he's like, finally someone who's gonna accept me. And then turns out she nope. didn't. That was a major no from her, and I think that's very sad, but also interesting that his mindset was really set on this woman is going to be the one that changes it all for me. He thought that his master, he goes to him being like, hey, if you make this bride for me, I'm not going to be a killer anymore. I can finally, just be a person. She had a different idea. She said, no.
She's like,
I don't want anything to do with you. Kind of looking at it, I think the marketing is really interesting on this movie because you think you're going to have this major character and it turns out no, she's kind of more of, I would say she's just kind of more of the catalyst for him just being like, you know what, I don't even really want to be here anymore. No one accepts me. No one is ever gonna accept me. Like I said, I think that is incredibly tragic, but also his thinking is just incredibly illogical. I don't think there's really a person or really anyone who can truly ever really save you except yourself.
That's true, but when you come from the monstrous point of view, he knows he's a monster. He can't really control it. He'd like to be more human. And he's very lonely. If you really think about it, he's really quite creepy. He is put together with dead parts. I can't imagine that's going to give you warm and fuzzy feelings on the inside about humanity, right? Because, this guy just brought you out into the world out of the selfish desire to make life without going through the normal channels. And it's like that part in Prometheus when David asks this guy's a total dick to him. Just for no reason, just because he's a robot. And he's just like, why did your kind create me? The whole premise of Prometheus is that they are trying to go find their creators because they found these, this certain grouping of stars. They were able to map it, and then they were able to get a really rich guy to fund their way there, which is the Wayland Corporation, which, is the prequel to Alien. Because Wayland Yutani, that comes up in Alien. So the point, though, is that David has this moment with this guy, and he's like, well, why did your kind create me? And he's like, we did it because we could. And David was like, imagine how disappointing it'll be to find out that that is the answer you're searching for. Because I think sometimes as humans, we create things just literally because we can and not really for any other reason. Closing arguments on Bride of Frankenstein?
I definitely agree with you. I think it's interesting that you bring up Prometheus, especially since Ridley Scott definitely likes to lean into religion a lot heavily, which, I mean, makes total sense as people. It's not insane to ever sit there and wonder, did someone create me? Mm-hmm. Am I just a star? I don't know.
Am I the sun?
Why am I here? Why did that fish have to walk out of water and now I have to pay taxes? Beautiful thing. But anyways, back to the point. I think that this easily also could have been a twist, the Bride of Frankenstein, on the biblical story of Adam and Eve. I mean, Eve was created to be Adam's companion, and Mary Shelley never shied away from using religion in the original story of Frankenstein. The monster questioned many a times, and even, I think, in the story of Related with Satan, feeling condemned, feeling gross, feeling just awful about himself.
So it made me think of something else. Victor Frankenstein was like, okay, I'm done with you now. It's like, dude, you just created him and then you abandoned him. But anyway, I wanted to make that point. But also, I don't think it's an Adam and Eve story. I think it's an Adam and Lilith story. Do you know that story?
No, I don't.
Okay. So in Judaism, Adam had one wife before Eve. And Lilith was, I believe, created out of the same material he was. And then Eve later, after his marriage with Lilith failed, she was created from his rib as sort of like an obedient thing because Lilith did not want to serve him. It actually came down to her wanting like to not be doing missionary anymore, essentially, because she was like, well, I'm equal to you. Why can't I be on top? And it's like, that's such a weird way to get a divorce, but okay. Anyway, but like Adam was like, no, like I'm the dude. I like toxic masculinity over here. Like, no, I'm your ruler. And she's like, fuck that. And then eventually she went off and became the mother of demons. She started hooking up with other creatures, probably jinn, actually, if we really think about the way the lore grouped all of these different creatures into the umbrella of demon. So I think it's like that because Lilith did not want to be his counterpart, right? So if you think about Frankenstein and the Bride, she didn't want to be his counterpart. She wanted to be above him. And then that comes up actually, oh my gosh, there are so many branches happening right now that are like happening on the fly. I might add, I did not have notes on any of this. So we also had in Penny Dreadful. Have you ever seen that show? It has like a whole bunch of people in it. It was a really good show that incorporated all of these gothic stories. Frankenstein, The Picture of Dorian Gray. Oh, and Dracula. Dracula's in there. All sorts of stuff. Like literally anything you think of gothic time period, it was in there. And it was all the same story, but it was fleshed out really well. But there's this point where Frankenstein creates a woman and she decides to reject not only Frankenstein's monster, but Frankenstein himself, who believes he's in love with this creation of his, which is such a guy thing to do, right? Like, I created you, you're basically her father, and it's like, no, maybe I created my perfect mate. And it's like, no, dude, she's smarter than you. And she ends up creating her own army of women, essentially, because she's like, women are superior to men. So I actually think that is a better Lilith story, but I do feel there are some themes there from the original biblical stories. And you said Mary Shelley used that, so that's awesome. Okay, any actual closing arguments left?
I would say also, I'm not sure if we really brought this up yet, but I think the marketing of this movie is incredibly interesting because the entire premise of this movie is the Bride of Frankenstein. And she's hardly in it. 2 to 3 minutes, probably even less, and has 0 lines. But I think it also goes to show how iconic just her design and the way that they actually utilized her in this movie, to the fact that everyone knows her.
Mm-hmm.
Even the people who have never seen this movie, if you say Bride of Frankenstein, boom. They know exactly what you're talking about. The design, the hair, it's, all of it. It's just incredibly, I think, impressive from that alone, because I think if movies tried to try that nowadays, they would not, I think, be able to pull that off successfully at all. And I think, if anything, they would quite piss off the masses.
Oh, for sure. I can't remember what movie it was, but there was a couple movies where the marketing was misleading. And there was at least one movie where somebody actually sued the company or something because it was so misleading.
Suicide Squad.
I think that's accurate, because there was like a moment in the movie where it all just switched tone, story, everything. Like it was written by someone else. But this case was put forward because people were so pissed. And I want to say it was in the horror world, but I'm not super sure, that this was something else than what was marketed. But yeah, if you really think about the marketing, Bride of Frankenstein, yeah, she's iconic almost to the point of being past him, right? She essentially transcended her 3 minutes to become a major pop culture figure. And I also can't help but think maybe it's like kind of a man thing. Like, not all men obviously are misogynists, thank God, but you know, like if you really think of the misogynistic male, of course the whole movie's going to be about him and then the 3 minutes when he gets married, you know? It is possible it was like that, or they made her so iconic that she stuck in people's minds along with him. Because he is also pretty iconic. I'll give you that, because like you can't tell me that a 6-year-old wouldn't be able to recognize who he is if you dressed up as him or as her. Right? That's like really the measure. It's like, would a kid know what this was? All right, so we are going to move on to Leprechaun 2, and I'm going to give her the mic because I need to look at my notes.
Well, here's what I wrote down. Unlikable characters, poor writing, some creative skills that scared 10-year-old to 12-year-old me once I got my first TV and I'm just flipping through the channels at night and looking at it. I was just like, even as an adult, some of those kills are pretty unsettling. Like the pot of gold being in his, uncle's belly and stretching him out. Oh my gosh. That was horrific. It makes me wish that the writing and these characters were a lot more likable than they were, because by the end of it, I'm just like, I don't even care what happens to this couple. You're telling me I'm supposed to be rooting for them? I think they're gonna break up by tomorrow. It's very clear that the production was incredibly rushed on this one. I think that they kind of pulled a Child's Play 3 where they were trying to get it out so fast that it was so rushed that it was incredibly poor. I think even Warwick Davis, who is this franchise's biggest cheerleader, hated this one. I don't think I'm really going to tread any ground that isn't significantly obvious here, but it's very clear that the Leprechaun has very outdated views on women being property and not people. And that's why there's just kind of that entitlement where it's like, your daughter's daughter is gonna be mine when I come back. So thanks a lot for trying to screw me over. Have fun with that.
So, Leprechaun 2, I recently did another episode, which if you follow this podcast, you probably listened to it, on all of the Leprechaun movies. So yeah, I had some thoughts. Oh my God. Yeah, like everything she said. We did not watch this together, by the way, and she had pretty much the same ideas that I did. Like, this was very spot on. I think what was going on is they had some really interesting lore, and this happens in like every Leprechaun movie where they've got something really special going on with the lore and how much thought they're putting into it, and then they completely disregard it next movie as if it doesn't even exist, because this feels more like an anthology than it does a sequel. The only thing that carries throughout the entire sequel, and I mean literally the only thing besides Warwick Davis himself, is the fact that like Clover is one of his weaknesses.
Wasn't it suddenly iron in this movie?
Yeah, like where did the iron come from? Although, like, if you look at Fae lore, yes, iron is a way to stop them, but it of course never came up again. Like nobody ever tried that, so whatever, right? Okay. So in this one, I actually really liked the girl. And I was really happy that they included a woman in this. Like, there's a woman in all of them, pretty much, if I'm not mistaken, except for 5. That one is male centered. But in the rest of these, she's not like the bride, though, right? Like, the bride, there's also this almost like misogynistic thing happening. She's just the bride of Leprechaun, right? Like she's not her own person or anything, but in this movie she actually is. She was pretty awesome, and she did not just kind of sit there waiting to be saved. She did unfortunately have to be saved in the end, but she was trying really hard to get out of the magical cave that he was holding her in. She was trying every single thing she could think of. She hit him. She tried to brain him with a rock. It was great. She also was not going to put up with male shit in the real world. There was a guy who tried to force himself on her, and she was like, I don't fucking think so. And then she hit him and ran away. I was all for it. Bridget, which is what her name was, which didn't come up a ton. Like, I had to look up what her name was, right? She was not here for men's shit. But here she was in this totally awful, like, women as property thing going on that spanned thousands of years. And it's kind of like, what did my family do to me? What have you wrought upon my head, man? Like, gosh, like these days you never even know. But yeah, any closing thoughts on Leprechaun and Bridget?
I think you favor her a lot more than I do. I personally, well, I do agree with you, and I think you did bring up some good points that it is cool that to see that she actually did try to do something. She was trying to stab him, like you said. She was trying to get out of that as much as possible. I don't think she was portrayed very likably. I think from the get-go, she was very rude to her boyfriend. Now, don't get me wrong. I can definitely see from her perspective why she was definitely annoyed that he had to put up with his deadbeat uncle and his business and all his alcoholism, and why she would be over that. But I just kind of felt bad for the male love interest in this movie, interestingly enough, a little bit, just because it seemed like he was trying to give it his all, and she just didn't really seem all that interested, to the point where she's like, I'm just gonna go hit on this other guy, basically try to get you to appreciate me, kind of thing. And I thought that was petty and childish. Of course, if you look at their age, it's very easy to excuse that, and at the end of the day, but I think it goes down to just portraying them more likably. Mm-hmm. I think it all just came off as a bit annoying and petty and superficial, and that I think it was very hard to get actually invested into them, versus just, like I said earlier, believing that I don't even feel like they're gonna make it tomorrow, so it's hard to be invested in this love story, really.
Honestly, I actually totally agree, even while I'm sitting here defending her, because I didn't think that was okay either. But I also, I think, have a lot of female rage, and it's kind of like, well, she didn't want to spend her night by herself, and then, like, yes, she was getting back at him, and that really isn't okay, but again, teenagers, right? I don't even think the leprechaun, like, basically nobody was likable in this movie. Although in every single Leprechaun movie, you have these really great lines that he says that are just so funny. I can't remember what it was for this one, but there's one in every single movie that you're like, oh, that was great. Like, I think they're not gonna make it. They're just not. Like, what do they have holding them together, really? Like, except for this weird experience. Trauma bonding. So, let's move on. I did want to talk about how there are different ways to be monstrous, if you really think about it. You could be homicidal, you could be greedy, you could be straight up evil. It isn't always on the outside for horror figureheads. In Pinhead's case, it is completely on the outside. You can see that man, that thing, is actually super evil. It's not always on the outside like it usually is, like Chucky and Leprechaun. Slappy isn't as ugly as he is creepy, you know? So, monstrosity, if you think about it, what does it mean to you?
I think that's a great question. Interestingly, in America, a lot of answers would be appearance. I think we are a very appearance-driven society, but I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and be like, I'm not like the other girls, so my opinion's better. No, but all jokes aside, I think genuinely what makes monstrosity is how you treat other people, how you are, what you do, what your motto in life is. Are you going in life cheating, people hurting, harming, belittling? I think that's truly what makes people monstrous.
You bring up a great point, though. Disability has been used in horror for years to explain, oh, their outside matches their inside. But when you think about disability in the real world and the way people are treated, it's awful. I don't care if you are the CEO or the janitor. If you're a nice person, I'm going to treat you as a nice person, right? I was talking about this with a coworker at the hotel I work at. Yeah, I don't care if you're the president of the United States. If you're rude to me, I'm going to tell you to get the fuck out of my hotel. You don't get to go around and act like people are beneath you just because they're in a service job. You know, you don't get to do that because they're not as rich as you or as beautiful as you or whatever else. And yet we give people, not we specifically, thankfully, but people usually give other people that power, and that's why they act like that. So it's like, if you come into my hotel and you scream at me for me to lower the price, guess what? I'm not going to do it because that rewards that behavior, as that's okay to do to people. I would rather be screamed at, honestly. I am that petty. So that's my 2 cents on that. I totally agree. It's how do you treat the world around you? So it makes me think of the Twilight Zone episode. You know the one I'm thinking of?
Which one?
The one where they all have like the pig faces. They're trying to operate on this woman. She's like, am I still ugly, doctor? They're like, we did all we could. You take her bandages off and she's beautiful. To us, but not to them. You know that one? The one I'm talking about? Yeah. And yeah, like she goes off, she's being banished essentially to this island where there is all these ugly people, and it's like they're all like gorgeous movie stars. But if you grew up in a world where that was not considered beautiful, wouldn't you believe you were ugly? Ugliness, I think, comes from inside us. Cruelty, wanting to do harm, that sort of thing.
I was just scrolling through Discovery Plus the other day, and there was a new dating show that was basically labeled as the other people, like the freaks. And I'm like, do you mean the rest of the population where everyone not, you know what I mean? Like all these dating shows, their priorities, do they have chiseled abs? Are they blonde? Are they conventionally attractive? And I'm like talking to my husband and I'm like, so you mean they're trying to label these people as freaks and the outcast when in reality you mean they're just people? Oh my God. It's awful. Yes. What the hell?
No, that's very real. Because, okay, if you really think about it, like this comes up in fairy tales too. It isn't my area, unfortunately, although it's really fascinating. I know that there's been some really amazing work done with disability in fairy tales. But think about the way children associate who is the bad guy, right? Ugly, bad. Beautiful, good. That's why I do love how in recent years Disney has started to incorporate characters that have ill intentions that are conventionally attractive. Although there is this joke that a friend of mine made that was like, you are letting the most vanilla man ruin your life. Like, he wasn't even that good looking. Calm down. Like, because isn't it such a thing with women to be like, he's better looking in real life? I've found myself doing that. Oh, wow. Okay. Dating shows especially, like, I've never wanted to watch one for the simple reason, and I'm not better than people who do watch them. They are trash TV everybody loves, right?
Oh, yeah.
I just think I'd be like, you're getting so upset over this man? He doesn't even seem that great. I think I'd just lose patience real quick.
The problem, of course, and most of these people's personality is that they're hot. So when you sit down and you actually listen to what they're talking about, sometimes it just feels like you're watching children interact and try to figure out certain things about life. Oh.
Yeah. You ain't got nothing going on there.
Wonderful. Like I said, personality of wet paper towels. And these women and just men are just like, oh no, this one girl or guy is not looking at me. What will I do with myself?
Also, have you ever actually looked at past bachelors? Somebody made a joke about it on like Twitter or TikTok or something, where they were like, have you ever noticed these seem like the same guy? They've all got like very nice jaw lines and dark hair, like, you know, like they all look like exactly the same man. And it's like, yeah, you're right. Their personality type is I'm a hot guy. Like, it's not, there's not a ton going on under the surface, and it really just, it does make you think about, because I've thought about this a lot, right? I was not considered attractive when I was a kid, and you remember I went through a lot of shit because of it. I had people who were just outright mean to me, other kids. I know that definitely adults can be casually cruel by accident, but it was the kids around my age, around 8, 9, 10, that were honestly the worst. And because I didn't grow up conventionally attractive, I wonder, am I a nicer person because of it? Because if you think about conventionally beautiful people who have been that way their entire lives, they do get special treatment because pretty privilege exists. They almost are never nice people. At least not at that point in time. Maybe they go through something later that helps them, but I do think it's that hardship that makes you nicer. Like, would I be a dick if I'd been pretty when I was a kid? And I started to blossom around 15 years old. That's when guys started taking notice of me, and I was really weirded out by it. I was like, what is happening? Like, why, what, you know, like, it's very disconcerting because you go from a life of being ignored, and then suddenly they're like, hey, what's up? And you're like, what?
Nothing is up.
What? Nothing is up.
Nothing's ever been up.
Go away, dude. Now I don't want attention from men because I am married as well, you know? So it's just one of those things. What do you think about that?
I think you bring up a lot of great points. As a child, I never felt ugly, but I felt like everyone always just saw me as just cutesy. Also, people just hated me for entirely just the way that I looked, because I looked different, and I think at some point, I internalized that, and I just kind of was like, I don't think I ever really want people looking at me, because I think that's just also just a journey of anxiety, and also just normal teenage anxieties on top of that as well. It's weird going from a perception of yourself of being like, oh, well, people always just see me cutesy, and they don't really, I'm not the girl, I've never been the girl that people had crushes on outwardly in class. I was ignored, and then suddenly you kind of blossom into womanhood, and it just kind of seems like every guy suddenly wants to get to know you. Navigating that was extremely weird, to a point where at times you're just like, you know, like, sup girl, and it's like I said, nothing ever earlier, nothing, no, go away. Now that I'm married, it's like, it almost feels slimy and gross when I get attention from men. I'm working retail over the season, and someone who could qualify as my dad was hitting on me at the cash register, and I'm like, I don't ever want to be looked at. And interestingly enough, going from dyeing my hair darker and going back to blonde, I've been hit on a whole lot more. I've been getting a lot more attention, I've noticed, from that. I think, interestingly, psychology does mention the fact that people who are prettier do tend to get more positive attention. They call it the halo effect. I think they've also studied that. I might be confusing it with another term more specifically. It's been a little while since I've seen it, but I think even in babies, children, when they see beautiful people, they tend to respond as well. So I think innately, biologically, on some level, we are hardwired to respond to prettier people, but I think society definitely takes it a step further and can be very harmful in the prioritizing that.
I've read about the halo effect too. That's the one, right, where they're like, oh, you are pretty and you like are conventionally attractive, that must mean that you're a good person and that I should trust you and all these things, right? Yeah, okay.
Automatically.
That's what I thought, because what it really means when people are conventionally attractive is it shows how fertile they are. So really, it's just like a way of evolution, figuring out who the healthiest viable options are. And it's like society took that and just went, way the other way with it and was like, hey, being pretty means you're better than everybody. And it's like, no, it doesn't. There's room for everybody, but it's weird out there. And yeah, there's a whole lot more to be said, but we are definitely getting off topic.
This is just a complete different tangent.
But I am actually going to reroute us so that we are on topic.
These are fun conversations.
I agree. These are fun conversations. All right, so something I wanted to bring up is maybe the reason for a bride in a series is because of merchandise. Why create one when you can create the pair and sell them both for more, right?
Yeah, look at Halloween. That's perfect.
And then if you think of dolls as being pairs, usually heterosexual pairs, right? And dolls as effigies, because dolls are mini us's. We put them out into the world because they are us. I believe that everybody and their relationship should be able to have equality and there not be a dominant culture, you know, because everybody deserves equality, I think. Once again, I've said this before in other ones, but if you are homophobic, transphobic, fatphobic, any of those, any really group of people that you hate because they're different, this is not the place for you. Go listen to another podcast, please. The point that I'm trying to make, though, is if you think about heterosexual relationships and marriage and how that is completely accepted in our culture and how they're effigies of us, what we're essentially putting out there in these movies, which span from the 80s up until now, right? Mainly. I'm sure we had a couple random ones in the 60s and 70s, but we didn't look that far back, sorry. Navigating back to the original point, normally it is the woman, the bride, that is prettier, right, than the man in some way. Like when Tiffany becomes a doll in Bride of Chucky, she's complimented. Do you remember that scene where like the two con artists come into the room and are basically crashing their honeymoon and being like, oh my God, what a beautiful little gift. I love her. She's so cute. And then looking at Chucky and being like, ooh, that's something else. That's gross. She says like, oh, this one has a face only a mother could love. And it's because he was stitched up because he was like blown up in the last one. Not that there was a ton of continuity there. I don't think he would have been in ribbons from that, but that's just me. But yeah, in this case, his soul is actually on the outside for all to see. If we brought Chucky's soul out to look at, that's probably what he would look like in Bride of Chucky, right? So once again, the things that have happened to him, the things that show on the outside are a sign of his badness. When it's like, what about the people who have burns and facial scarring? Are they bad people because of that? No, of course not. Horror naturally plays with those rules. Tiffany's is also pretty twisted, but she's also more easily acceptable, I feel like, as monsters go. I think it's because she's so sympathetic. Even though she is an accessory to Chucky, have you ever noticed that? She never operates without Chucky in that world. She's never doing her own thing. She's never pursuing her own wants, needs, desires. She is always working with him because Chucky is the center of her world, which is pretty misogynistic if you really think about it. I do wish she wasn't just part of his story, and she had her own thing going on, but she's very codependent. It was written into who she was.
I definitely agree with saying that Tiffany is a very codependent person. I think weirdly in our society, of course, there is a big shift now, and I'm not talking about necessarily today, but I think if you look back then, I know it's supposed to be kind of a twisted kind of story, but you look at how females are generally socialized back in the day, that love is just about everything, and being a bride is pretty much ingrained on some level in a lot of households, that's your importance in life, is to be that.
Yeah, I actually had another point about that, because you're right. Women are socialized a lot of the time, even now, sadly, to think, oh yeah, being a bride is the best part of life, including being a mother, and that your body is basically just a vessel for a child. But have you ever thought about how women are socialized? Like, we are socialized to not be violent when we are, you know, like kids. Men are basically told, yeah, it's okay to be violent because you are violent in your genetic code, right? Women are taught to fight with words and be catty and evil in other ways that don't include physical violence. So I just wanted to point that out for everybody because I was bullied quite heavily, but it was by my friends and it was not physically.
No, I totally agree. In psychology, they talk about that so much in the socialization of children, where it's like at a certain point, boys fight with their fists and women fight with their words. And out of the two of those, words are more harmful. They always will be. Sticks and stones may break your bones, but words may never hurt you. That is not true. That is a lie. Anyone who has ever been bullied in their life, I bet you, tell you what, they can remember who did it, who said it, when, and what, because it is that harmful. I was going to bring up the fact that Tiffany, especially in women, sociopathy, antisocial personality disorder, it's not typical to show violence. I think that goes back to that socialization, but they are also irritable, moody, will fight with their words, and I think Tiffany is also just kind of a good antithesis of that, showing that, no, she's violent, but she's also catty too, and has those moments. But it's also, like you said earlier, I think what makes Tiffany so accessible is that she is sympathetic. You do feel for her, even though she's done these awful things. I think there is a part of her that is remorseful on some level, even if it might just be kind of for personal gain. I mean, you see it in Seed, especially when she becomes a mom. She does feel a need to reconcile and almost apologize to, for, even though it's kind of seen cast in more of a comedic light where she's calling up someone and being like, sorry, I killed your husband. Yeah. I have an addiction to killing, I would say, is also the antithesis of what would probably make her qualify as someone who is antisocial personality disorder, is because she is remorseful at times. She is someone where you can see that she is clearly a perpetrator, not a great person, but also a victim as well.
Her behavior with Chucky just seems like somebody who's reaching for something they're not going to have. Like, that part in Bride where she's just like, you haven't changed, you'll never change, like, and I've literally been in a prison of being in love with you when you're not going to give me what I deserve out of this relationship, when she literally searched for him for 10 years and probably never stopped and has always helped him. I think we feel for her because we all know or have been the victim of somebody who didn't love us back. And she's really funny. Yeah, and she's pretty, like, I don't know, there's something about Tiffany that is really easy to love. She's a little bit different from these traditional bride stories because she's from Chucky's before times, right? If you think about the invention of her coming in, she is technically a new invention, but as we got further into the TV series, we saw that she actually knew him back when he was Charles Lee Ray. And we sort of knew that in Bride, but it was really solidified in the TV series that he met her at a club or something. Yeah. I'd love to see her have her own story, because, like, she's super fun. She adds a really fun element to the Chucky movies, and any callback to her, fans absolutely love. I think I love her because, like, also she's one of the original, like, she was probably the first woman I saw dressed as a goth in film. Like, not to say she was the first one ever dressed that way for film, but she was the first one I ever saw.
I think you bring up a great point in the fact that she is kind of one of those figures, one of the probably, I don't want to say first ever, but one of the first probably majorly popular that do dress up in goth. Black lipstick, the leather, embraces it, and she's just completely comfortable in her own skin. It could be because her personality, there's a lack of just remorsefulness to a point where she truly doesn't care about the people around her, what they think about her, her attitudes and all that. I think she's just an amazing character in that regard, that just seeing a woman comfortable in her own skin, defying the norms of what's conventionally attractive or sexy. She's definitely in that movie portrayed more as a femme fatale, and you can easily be like, yeah, she was definitely at times probably more for male gaze, but at the same time you can't help that she just seems like she's having a great time with what she's doing, so you don't feel completely like gross with yourself for like enjoying, I guess, to some degree, Jennifer Tilly being amazing and a sex symbol. You can easily go back and be like, yeah, okay, I'm rolling my eyes a little bit, that was probably for the male gaze, but she's just having so much fun with it, it's hard to be mad.
And that perfectly brings me to my next point, which is it's the magic of certain actresses like Jennifer Tilly and now recently Mia Goth in Pearl, who can make us feel sorry for but also entertained by these people's homicidal impulses. Another thing I noticed that's similar in the Chucky movies and X is that dolls is because the dolls and the old people, they aren't supposed to be murdery. If you really think of dolls, like you think of dolls as an adult and you're like, okay, that's a little creepy, but you're not immediately associating it with murder. The reason we associate with murder at all is because of movies like this, right? Same thing with old people. Do you really think of old people as being dangerous? No, not really, right? We underestimate them, and that's exactly how they get the jump on us. There's almost always this misogynistic element to the bride trope, this whole idea that he owns her, which we talked about a little bit with Leprechaun 2. And there's often like a major lack of consent, like bringing up Goosebumps and how Slappy just decided that instead of marrying the doll, which would have made total sense in everyone's minds, he's like, no, I'm gonna marry the girl and she'll be my slave forever. And it's like that's not completely weird, like on so many levels. But also, like, she didn't ask for that. You didn't ask her to marry you. You just decided she was going to. So, oh, and then the Bride of Frankenstein did not ask to be resurrected from girl parts. She was, and then yeah, why is she automatically paired with him? What, because they're similar? Like what, she can't have her own path? She's not her own person?
Yeah, just because she's a monster, that means she has to be with him all of a sudden because he's a monster as well. There's definitely, I think, a good argument that those movies kind of address that expectation. You have to be with me because, and it's like, no, we don't have to be with you just because.
Also, like, what? He's less of a man because he doesn't have a human woman he's currently enslaving? Like, what is it with these magical creatures being like, yeah, I'm gonna get a bride. She'll do my cooking and stuff for me. And it's like, ew. That's disgusting. Because there are also times that I feel like the bride concept comes in only when they ran out of ideas. Then right after they go to space. Oh. Like Wishmaster goes to space. Or they go to New York. Because why not, really? Or to hell. Hell is a really interesting trope, but that's a whole different thing. Because, yeah, like, if you think about Wishmaster, we're not going to talk about a ton. It's actually a really difficult movie to get through. Much like Leprechaun 2. It also has that trope. This is a djinn. Djinn are not human. And I don't believe they ever were human in this iteration either. Like, Wes Craven knew that and was like, I mean, the sequels I don't think have anything to do with Wes Craven. The only one that does is the first one. But he eventually falls in love with a human woman. But that goes along with djinn lore. Djinn do fall in love with women. And actually, female djinn called djinnia fall in love with men. Which would suck if you really think about it. Because it's like, oh, once again, there's a lack of consent. I can do nothing about this. This thing has just decided it's in love with me. That's so awesome. Anyway, so another thing I wanted to bring up was that most kids have their dolls get married at some point. Because of its prevalence in our society, bride dolls are a thing, specifically brides. Like, our mom had one. We've told that story before. It blinked at us both, and she got rid of it because, like, we're not having a good time.
We were just scared of commitment.
We were scared of commitment. We're both married. Yeah, we're scared. Anyway.
Also, just kind of in general, there is a lack of prioritizing for marriage these days. I think my husband is a good example of that. When him and I were kind of going back and forth between, do we want to get married before we live together? Should we cohabitate, get to know each other a little bit more before we get married? That was definitely kind of on our mind a little bit more. And I think talking with people my age, you see that a lot, especially on shows like 90 Day Fiancé the other way, when their parents are telling like their children who are like 17, 18, 19, 20, they bring up those concerns. Like, you've never even lived with this person. How do you even know that their quirks, how they, fold their clothes or isn't gonna annoy you? You don't even know this person. You know the fraction of a person when you're dating them versus when you're married to them. And I think that that's pretty important to bring up, that there's definitely more of an ideological shift in our society these days of just being like, we should probably get to know each other a little bit more before we just tie it down.
And what's funny about you saying that, so I had taken a sociology class over the summer one year, and it actually talked about how when you cohabitate with somebody, you are actually have much higher chance of breaking up with them because the stakes are not as high. You move out, you find a new place to live, it'll be okay, right? But when you are married, you are basically forced to work the problem because it is not easy to get a divorce. If it was easier, I bet more people would get divorces, although it's happening quite a bit now because people realize like, oh, I'm not the same person I was when I married you. We grew apart instead of growing together. You cheated on me or I cheated on you. Also, if you really think about dolls in general, there is this like what I call the dark carnival concept, where if you found it at a carnival and it could kill you in horror movies, that's what I call the dark carnival. So dolls are definitely something you could win at a carnival, right? It brings something we remember from childhood into adulthood. And it's really similar to that because, yeah, people actually do get married at carnivals and state fairs. It's weird, but it happens. So... yeah. Frontier Days is something else. Anyway, we are getting a little off topic. We're going to go back into dolls because it made me think of also the uncanny valley. Dolls sometimes look a little bit too much like people, so they weird us out. Once again, they are effigies, and they were originally created to be vessels. So, like, that's a little weird for all of us because they look just like us, and they are supposed to represent us. But we totally lived for these little weirdos as kids, which is why it feeds into the realization of the dark carnival, like why these things can be used that way. Because childhood was a bit of a weird time, a wonderful time of imagination, but things from that time, if you bring them into adulthood, are a bit creepy as hell. Like, do you know any 35-year-old woman who's like playing with her Barbies? Like, I don't. Not to say it like you do you. Oh, maybe that would be weird, So there's that. But let's get into Megan. Yeah, I personally loved Megan. She definitely activates my uncanny valley, like weirdness senses. She's a standalone female doll. The question is, in these sequels she's getting, which have already been greenlit, is she ever going to have a male counterpart to go be trashed together, like in Bride of Chucky? Because I doubt it.
I hope not. In all honesty, kind of going off what you said, I hope not. I really hope that she does not have a true male counterpart, because I think on some level what made this movie so refreshing was the fact that the protagonist and the antagonist, all of it were women. I think it's the uncanny valley, man. It was weirding out both my husband, and it was insane. My husband's like full dude action, I want the big guns and I want the superheroes. It was amazing to watch his jaw be on the floor by how creeped out and how well they executed. I would say this movie is more of a psychological thriller than really a true monster movie. And I think that's incredibly brilliant because the movie goes there. It doesn't hold back when it's time, but it also took the time to sit there and address those concerns about our generation is being raised by technology and how technology, our values as a society change a lot slower than technology does. And then it brings up all those questions of how do you parent your child effectively when it's easy to throw a screen in front of them? What damage psychologically are we going to accidentally end up doing by using technology irresponsibly? I think the movie just captures all those anxieties brilliantly while also just having an amazing lead cast of an aunt that's suddenly forced for the first time in her life to take care of this child that she probably on some level never truly thought she would ever be responsible for. Of course, on some level it's easy to be like, yeah, I know, of course I would always take care of my sister's children, but I don't think she ever really thought she would ever have to do that.
I'd even argue, though, that it's like a blend of the monstrous and psychological thriller, because AI thinks about things so logically that it removes humans from the equation. But that's a different thing that what I was going to go into. I think Gemma gets a lot of unnecessary shit.
Oh, yeah.
Like, especially from that social worker. What was that? She was a career woman. There's nothing wrong with being that. She hadn't met the right person. She may have never wanted kids, and that really is okay. It's not a judgment on her that she doesn't want children. I don't judge anybody who doesn't want children, because I get it. I have some fears about pregnancy. Like, yes, ultimately I do, but that's my choice. But I'm still gonna be like, turning towards my husband and being like, you did this to me. Like the whole 9 months. I hate you. I don't want to do this. But anyway, Megan, I've also realized she functions as a metaphor for advancement and even marketing gone wrong. Chucky was her predecessor, and then Talkie Tina from the Twilight Zone being like, I'm gonna kill you. It's like, oh, well, that's a lot, is actually his predecessor. Talkie Tina was the first female doll. And it probably had to do with the time period, right? Being that this was before boys played with action figures. It's like they're dolls, guys, whatever. And there's nothing wrong with boys playing with dolls. There's nothing wrong with girls playing with action figures, or, like, what else do boys play with? Swords. And I liked both of them. I thought they were fun.
Psychology actually supports males playing with dolls. They have found that it does foster those fatherly instincts in them. It fathers a nurturing side that I think society often likes to neglect with guys. So I think the research on that is incredibly fascinating. So have your little boys play with dolls. What is the worst that is gonna happen? He becomes an amazing father? Oh no!
No, I get it, but, misogynists are gonna be like, oh, well, you'll become more effeminate. And it's like, dude,
I think they need that.
I feel like, yeah, boys, not every boy, and I'm sorry, we are talking a lot about misogyny here. If you are a guy and you're listening to this, you're like, hey, misogyny, unfortunately, is a very real thing in our society. It is not every man. Like, a lot of my good friends in the paranormal are men, and they are awesome people. And they do think like this. We're just saying, why not have boys slightly more socialized like girls, in the way that girls are told to talk about their feelings? Talk about it with your girlfriends. Talk about it with your mom. We have to do better for this next generation of men, so that they have the ability to deal with the things that come at them. Mental health is a real problem, especially in this country. It can get dangerous when mental health is not addressed.
Oh, yeah, no, easily. I 100% agree with that. If you are socialized not to talk about your feelings, how are you supposed to work through them? How are you supposed to rationalize what you are going through? I mean, in suicide populations, it is disproportionately higher for men to take their lives, I would say, easily than women. And I think that dangerous socialization of, oh, well, it's not manly to talk about your feelings, has a lot to do with that.
Something, though, I do wonder about making Megan a female doll. Is she representative of women being more threatening within the established patriarchal culture? Women are pushing back against the cultural prisons that have kept them under control for the past, how long has it been? Hundreds and hundreds of years. Yeah, hundreds of thousands of years. Like, I mean, I don't know how long humans have been on the planet. I'm just gonna be honest. I'm not that type of, like, I may have a master's of science, but not that type of science. Pretty much almost in every culture, not every single one, thankfully, most have been patriarchal institutions where men were in control. Megan is the inevitable evolution of that fear, that this is something in a female form that cannot be stopped and will destroy the world of men.
I think one of the things that popped into my head, whether it was they meant to do it in subtext or not. It definitely is something they didn't address openly, but I think Megan definitely encapsulates, whether men want to admit it or not, anxieties about them. Like, is she too good to be true? I think is a lot of men's attitudes, and if she is, there's a chance there's something devious underneath that too. All that caring, that lovingness, at what price does it come to?
Which shows a serious mistrust in women in general, right? Like, and that's a little scary. We were talking about this when we had both seen the movie. We were like Megan's breaking new ground, but she's also not somehow at the same time.
Yeah, I would say she's definitely reinventing the wheel. A new one. She's not a new concept, but like Chucky before her, addresses the concerns of the time. Our technology is just advancing at such a level to the point where I don't even think as humans, to some level, we can fully comprehend, how vast that is. Just like Gemma, when she's addressing, like, you had no idea what you were doing with me. You wanted me to do everything for her. And now here I am, and I'm gonna do it, and I'm gonna do it better than you ever could.
Yeah, I mean, it's scary. You brought up a really great point, which just leads right into my next one, which is toy consumption. And how Child's Play, Don Mancini, who is the creator of Chucky, was thinking about it as a dark satire of the way consumerism, merchandising, and advertising all affects specifically children, and how weird that is that we specifically are targeting children who we know for a fact cannot think for themselves, at least not at that age. We are literally playing tricks on them. Is it ethical to market to kids? And I don't think it is at all, and yet we are still doing it. It's still very unregulated. Think about in the beginning of Megan, there was that toy that they were working on and shits itself. Yeah, it's like, okay. If you think about the way that toy is being marketed, I also think it's yet another commentary. Like you said, reinventing the wheel, being like, hey, we are marketing directly to children. And now parents are just as distracted as their children. So they'll probably just get it. And that's really dark if you think about it. It's a very scary reality that we are all so plugged in that we're not really being the human race anymore. Even when we were kids, we had technology, but it was fairly new, and we still went outside. Our parents still spent a lot of time with us. Now you have to make a concerted effort to have that kind of family time. What do you think about that?
Oh, I totally agree. I think this movie, definitely a vast majority of the focus of this movie was technology and parenting, and how we're distracted to the point of we're not being parents anymore, and the devastating consequences that will have on our children behaviorally. I hear the stories all the time now. You look at people who wanted to be teachers their entire lives so badly, and they had to leave because people don't discipline their kids anymore. They don't give them attention anymore. I think on some level, like my sister said, we've become so distracted and plugged in on some level. Now, I can't speak for every parent. I think there's also much bigger issues going on with social class and really money, consumerism, and just bigger problems than that too. But the emotional ramifications are, you're gonna have kids with zero discipline. You're gonna have more adults with zero discipline, zero motivation. Just behavioral problems, I think, are going to become a much bigger thing. There's a reason that the mental health field is expanding. I don't think we can fully comprehend until the decades to come really how bad things are going to get. I think they're probably just going to get worse. This movie didn't really it did. I think it was subtle, but consumerism, I would say, easily is a lot more dangerous than just technology consumption. It's manipulative. The children, like my sister said, they cannot think for themselves. And innately, as children, we're selfish. Mm-hmm. We want the things around us. We want that cute new toy just because our friend had it. When I was like probably 8. My friend had a panda bear that could hug her, and I'm like, I was obsessed with that. I could not stop thinking about that panda that could give me a hug. In this movie, while it does a much more satirical angle of consumerism, it also brings up how dangerous it is, and the boss being like, it doesn't matter how much, in all honesty, that she's gonna cost. They're gonna want to spend that 10 grand, 10 plus grand on her, because we're going to market her as the thing that they cannot live without. And even exploiting the little girl's trauma in that interview, her being like, I lost my parents died, and Megan was here for me. That scene where you can just see Gemma's heart being ripped out of her chest, essentially, you can just kind of see it's finally hitting her. You know, how exploitative her own industry is towards her niece. And I think as an audience, too, my heart completely broke at that scene.
Yeah, mine too. I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty sure I cried. Like, this poor girl. And also, she's such an amazing actress. Love her. She's been in a couple other things, too, like Haunting of Hill House. She was in Dr. Sleep. If you think about the way that they kept pushing the launch, even when all of her bugs had not been worked out. Think about the technological industry right now, like how much of what we're using right now is unregulated. How much of it has not been tested, and how quickly could AI turn on us? Because we already have scientists who are working on AI, and there have been for years questions about AI. Like, is it going to try to eventually take over because it believes it could regulate our world better? And also, are they right? Because humans suck a bit and our world's in serious decline. And would a robot run it better? Because I've been thinking about that a little bit. But anyway, so Robert Romanician, I learned about this in anthropology. He had this concept. I talk about it all the time. Like, you can ask anybody who went to grad school with me, or I even bring it up in regular conversations, because it was such a mind-blowing concept that we put walls and screens and all sorts of things in between us and the outside world because nature scares us. And it does. And nature can kill us. Nature can do all sorts of things, right? Like between us and that storm outside. And instead of grappling with that fear, we just created things to keep us safe from the fear. And the only way we are ever going to be able to do a homecoming where we connect better is to get rid of all the screens and the walls between us, because it's also a metaphor for us being disconnected. The reason we're disconnected is because we're afraid. So we put screens between us. Like, you'll see it, people at dinner who are both on their phones. Is this the way that we want to keep going? Of course, not everybody, but enough people that things have gotten a little weird out there. So we also have this combination of innocence in the plastic face that we see, but with the twisted soul on the inside. So the Dark Carnival, is all about exposing childhood for being weird at best and disturbing at worst. And this is all, like, Megan feels like a caricature of our lives that has gone completely wrong. But it is exposing some real issues in our world. So yeah, she may not have broken ground, but she is still a female-centered series that is like a doll. Dolls are traditionally female except for Chucky, but I do feel like she was, if not reinventing the wheel, making the wheel better. She's just like a caricature of our world, because that's exactly where we're headed. And then think about like the haunted doll industry. Right now, people are selling dolls that they're like, yeah, this thing's haunted. I had one given to a friend of mine. It's actually right over there. I keep it in a separate room just in case. You never know. But the truth is, like, based off of the way she looks, she's way too clean. She was machine made, but she is made to look like she's homemade, right? I also got no feeling from her. Neither did Mom. There's nothing about her that suggests she's haunted. She is most likely a reproduction of a haunted doll. But think about that industry and the way it's taking advantage of people who want to believe. Right? And I was gifted it because my friend was like, oh, I couldn't communicate with it. Here you go. I was like, okay. I guess I'm the one that you give the haunted doll to when it doesn't work for you.
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly. This movie, it knows when to pull its punches. It knows when to retract. It knows... I feel like what makes this movie so compelling is that it knows when, really, how just to be menacing with her. It knows. Like the scene with the kid who just really just gave major he's gonna become a rapist vibes in the woods, man.
Or a psycho killer.
Yeah, no, just all that antagonizing the poor little girl. I forgot her name. Oh, gosh, I feel like such a bad researcher.
I actually don't
niece,
know either. I'm sorry.
Gemma's niece. Yeah, the tension and the building in that scene. Just, she's gonna do something, but also the commentary when she's just finally just like, you know what happens to bad little boys? And just rips his Katie, there we go. When she just finally, I feel like, especially in that scene, finally just, definitely violent enough is enough of being bullied, being tormented, and I feel like also that's just a good metaphor for, Taylor Swift talks about it all the time, but women are basically taught to, put up with male's antagonism. For the longest time, they would tell their kids, oh, well, if, he's bullying you on the playground, it means he likes you. You realize how harmful that is? Teaching your little girl to be like, yeah, no, he's bullying you and he's putting you down because he cares about you.
Yeah.
That's not love. It's not love, kids. Anyways, I kind of went on a tangent. The consumerism, while like we talked about earlier, was leaned into and more silly, but it's also just was incredibly alarming when it wanted to be. And statistically speaking, consumerism leads to a lot of lower life satisfaction, lower happiness, lower social cooperation, as well as higher rates of depression, anxiety, racism, and antisocial behavior. So teaching your kids to value materialism, it does not raise good people. Actually being involved in your community, spending more time with your friends and family, engaging in hobbies that challenge you intellectually, and while it kind of sounds facetious and annoying, exercising, that's the stuff in life that's going to make you happy. Not, your Rolls Royce, your 5 mansions. You look at certain YouTubers and just the alarming things that they do. This stuff is being worshipped and eaten up by kids. And you see a lot of little kids be like, I want to be just like my YouTuber, with 15 mansions and $5 bazillion. And it's like, those are the values that are going to harm.
I think also if you really think about rich people, like really rich people, like exorbitantly excessive riches, those people don't seem very happy. At a certain point, they don't have to flaunt their wealth because it's so much around them. People who do actually seem to have a little bit of insecurity from what I've seen in the hotel industry. But yeah, it doesn't raise good people to value those things and to create idols out of rich people. Yeah, it would be cool to be rich, sure, but I also don't think, I think unfortunately the way that humanity is, it is out of struggle that we find who we really are and then learn what joy is because of that struggle, because we've been through that struggle. If you had had everything handed to you your entire life, how would you know what joy was? And if you had every experience open to you, what is joy? There's a lot of substance abuse. There's a lot of depression and anxiety and the things that you had mentioned because they're not happy. But something I want to go back to with the way that women are kind of taught to put up with male meanness and cruelty and taught that it's love. Now what's happening though is something I'm seeing on TikTok, men start to devolve into the dumbest insults they can possibly think of, and they're not working anymore because women are not bound by those things anymore. So they'll be like, oh, you're just ugly, or you're just fat and you'll never find a husband. And she's like, cool, I'm excited for that. Can I sign up somewhere so I don't find a husband? You calling me fat and ugly? Oh my god. I think I'm destroyed now. Because women are not taking that shit anymore. They cannot be controlled by those things. So I think Megan is an evolution of that fear. What happens when women cannot be controlled? Scary things for men, at least certain types of men anyway. It's not all men. I know. I have to keep saying that because we're men suck and men are this and men are that. Narcissistic men, misogynistic men. Toxic masculinity.
No, don't get me wrong. Of course, men on some level, they feel like when you make criticism on certain men, I think sometimes innately they're like, oh, you're attacking me. And it's like, no. I'm attacking toxic masculinity, not you, babe. But Megan, like, I think we're just kind of talking about the same thing now at this point, but Megan does a great job of addressing what happens when you can't control a woman anymore. What if you can't freak her out anymore? What if you can't insult her? What if, what I mean?
Stronger, faster,
What if she's stronger, faster,
smarter,
harder, stronger, Daft Punk song? Then what?
Yeah, I know.
Women are probably going to rule the world. That's probably what. But yeah, great movie. I hope in all honesty, actually, I hope, this is kind of probably more of a closing argument, but I hope in the next Megan, while it was definitely brought up and it was soul crushing when they did, I hope they lean more into the argument of consumerism and how dangerous, even more dangerous it is for children. Not just, the irresponsibility of parent and technology, because technology isn't inherently a bad thing. It's how we consume it. It's our attitudes about it. I think that can make it incredibly harmful, because it's easy, I think, for a lot of professionals to be like, well, technology doesn't give anyone any social skills, but there's a lot of research that shows that that's not true. Mm-hmm. When you're interacting with people who are like-minded of your peer group, in fact, it can actually give you social skills. So really, I think where technology consumption can become really harmful is when you're not interacting with people, your peers, family, or anyone. And when you're comparing yourself to someone like an influencer, like, I don't know, all you see on their Instagrams are them traveling to beaches and, seeing them with their photo shoots. You're not seeing the days where they are probably crippled by anxiety about what they're putting out there. Because it's easy. It's very easy, I think, for us to attack them. But at the same time, they've done a lot of stuff. I don't think really easy for any human to put themselves out there so openly. That's just me personally. Maybe on some level they innately enjoy it, but I don't think it's easy for anyone to put a book out there or sell a brand or dabble into makeup.
So interesting you bring up branding. So what I think is going to happen in the next Megan is they are going to find the technology, unearth it, and rebrand her as something else.
Oh yeah, the secretary stole her files.
So that's right. The secretary stole the files, so Megan's in the world. Oh, that sucks. We're going to move off Megan for a second to talk about Dead Silence for 5 seconds, because this is going to be a long one, folks. I'm sure you know that if you're listening this far. But I do want to talk about how when there is a relationship between a woman and a doll, sometimes it goes back into that like childhood mother baby. So if you think about Mary Shaw, you've seen Dead Silence, right?
Yes.
Okay. So like, you remember how her dolls were her children? She couldn't have kids, so she made dolls. And she would do her ventriloquist shows, and she started to murder people who didn't think they were real or whatever, but they were very real to her. That must have hurt. I love the rhyme they do, like Mary Shaw had no kids, only dolls. What was the rest of it? It was something like, I'm gonna look it up while you talk.
Hello there. That movie was, I think, critically, and this is just a critical standpoint, it was a lot more interesting in concept, I think, than actual execution. Unfortunately, I think there are a lot of great ideas there. I think there were a lot of good imagery. I mean, the poster, I can still visually see the poster in my head without even having seen it in years. So on some level, there was creativity there, but I think it's definitely, of course, this is more a matter of opinion, questionable if the portrayal actually lined up with that. I think, in all honesty, especially since we live in such a major sequel and kind of requel and redoing, I think someone should pick that up and reimagine that. I think it would be an amazing social commentary that would really actually make that movie thrive.
That was one of his earlier movies. The guy who did Insidious, and yeah, you know who I'm talking about. So yeah, like, he's a huge star now. Saw was one of his first movies as well. But Dead Silence, I had read that it went through rewrite hell, and just like he didn't really have the ability to do what he wanted with it. So there are some parts that are a little choppy, and I feel like he kind of like runs around doing all this stuff, but nobody can forget the old theater with all the dolls there, and then like the demonic spirit or whatever coming through the clown. It was great. It was really great horror in how he was exploring this. But anyway, the rhyme is beware the stare of Mary Shaw. She had no children, only dolls. And if you ever see her in your dreams, be sure you never ever scream. And then the trailer had like she'll rip your tongue out at the seam. So I just think she was a really great villain, and how motherhood in that story gets twisted into something it's not. So it's not exactly Dark Carnival, but it's like Dark Carnival adjacent. I'd have to come up with a different term, but it's a natural process that happens that is becoming demented, and horror loves to play with that.
Oh, I definitely agree. My mind is bouncing around so much, in all honesty. I just completely went back to the fact that I didn't really talk about the fact that I think sociology totally supports the fact that there's a total double standard if you want to be a professional. Just be a professional woman who's not interested in having kids at all. And then there's also a double standard if you want to be a professional woman and have kids. Like, especially in academia. Mm-hmm. How dare you to basically want to pursue education and have a family at the same time, and then meanwhile men who do the exact, they're rewarded. You're an amazing father for wanting to provide for your family and better yourself, but as a woman wanting to do that, you're crossing the line. Forever wanting to, and you're probably doing irreversible damage to your child somehow.
Can't have your cake and eat it too.
Essentially, you're selfish. And it's like, oh, lovely, beautiful. Yeah. I love that for us. Yeah, I wanted to make sure I put that in. Gosh, this is probably going to be hell to edit.
Yeah, thanks.
You're welcome.
Anyway, okay, we're going to wrap it up now, finally. It's been good. Hope you enjoy it. All the rabbit holes we went down. But I think like our closing argument is that there is something internally misogynistic about the concept of the bride doll and how it shows up in movies, and how there's a lack of consent, especially with these supernatural elements of like, oh, well, you're just going to be my bride and you have no say in it. But yeah, also we keep putting out doll movies, so they are still important to our society. Right? And our values and the things that we're putting out, because our folklore will tell you about us, but so will our horror movies. If you look at, I'm writing a separate article about this, but 2000s horror, it is telling us that people were genuinely afraid of the end of the world in 1999, ushering in 2000, and that they were really thinking about the mysteries of Christianity. There's a lot of movies like that. But anyway, no more tangents. Hope you enjoyed this episode of Demon Folklorist, Monstrous Brides with Lex. Say goodbye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Hope you have a non-monstrous bride day and a non-demon day. Thank you.